He especially liked ladies, and those were much older ladies. Even if they were several decades older, he felt good in their company. He could talk with them, and it seems that he was also able to meet their expectations. Hi, welcome to another episode of Criminality Patrol. I think every city has places like that, once considered iconic spots where people used to come, where there was fun, and it was real, full-on fun. This is one of those places. As you can see, it's already pretty faded. Today it's basically just a ruin and an empty building, but it really used to be full of life. This is the Krakow Hermitage, that's what it was called. This iconic place, and as is usually the case with such spots, each one of them is connected to some kind of criminal story. We invite you to watch and listen to one of them. This is actually a place that used to be full of entertainment. Besides the Hermitage venue, there's a brewery nearby, a beer hall, a restaurant, and there used to be a cinema here as well. It was basically an entertainment district. It's no wonder that at the end, not far from here, there's also the somewhat iconic police station called the White House. In Krakow, nobody really calls it the second police station. Everyone just says the White House, and everyone knows it means the police station. And actually, if someone came to Krakow or was interested in this topic, the whole area, about 300 meters from the Krakow main square, used to be an entertainment district. An entertainment district. It was called Wesoła because there were a lot of places here that were for entertainment. Brothels, pleasure houses, bordellos, those were the names, or houses of shame. Of course, the most popular name was simply brothels, and that's been the case since the Middle Ages. This part of the city, called the Pleasure District, led to all sorts of situations, including many criminal incidents. Such a criminal story is connected with the Hermitage, and that's the story we want to tell you about today. And by the way, it was also here in the rooms of the former establishment that one of the biggest fires in the city broke out in July 2023. The fire, which firefighters fought for 7 hours, practically destroyed all the furnishings of the former establishment. But that was in 1998, so quite a few years ago. 3 ladies, Danuta, Elżbieta and Teresa, who used to be co-workers, decided to come to the Hermitage to have some fun. The ladies were, so to speak, of a certain age, around 40 to 47 years old, and had already been through a lot, some even after divorces. 3 co-workers who, well, they told themselves it was worth having some fun and arranged to meet at that place on September 16, 1998, especially for Teresa. A 47-year-old woman going out like that was something important, something exciting, because she lived in Nowa Huta and usually didn't have the chance to take advantage of the charms of Krakow at night. That day, Elżbieta had her car. She took the car so they could get back more easily, because there was supposed to be a party, an all-night dance, so they expected that in the morning they might have trouble getting home. They got into the car. Teresa was wearing a white blouse, a colorful skirt and black patent leather shoes. She looked nice, did her makeup well, and that's how they came here to the Hermitage, sat at a table, ordered some food, and there was some alcohol. They looked around the room, and after a while, a very handsome young man came up to their table. He really made an impression on the ladies, especially since he was nice and articulate. It was clear from the beginning that this young man named Marian was especially interested in Teresa. He asked her to dance several times. Then he sat at the table, and it was clear that he was a well-mannered young man, nicely dressed and very handsome. All the ladies liked this young man, especially because he was very handsome. He was interested in Teresa. Even when he went to the restroom, Teresa said to her two other friends, Elżbieta and Danuta, "I really like this guy." And that's pretty much how they spent the whole night. Basically, Marian was dancing with Teresa the whole time as well. The party ended and the place was being closed down in the early morning. All four of them had already left the place at that point. They got into Elżbieta's car and drove to Nowa Huta, to the neighborhood on the hills. Danuta got out first. At first, Teresa and Marian were sitting on the back seat of the car. While Elżbieta was driving, she glanced at the mirror and saw that Marian was trying to kiss Teresa. She seemed to pull away, as if she didn't want to, but it was probably more of a flirtation on her part. And maybe she saw that Elżbieta was simply watching them. Both Marian and Teresa got out, not far from the apartment building, and Teresa and Marian went together. Elżbieta drove away. Everything indicated, at least that's how it seemed from the conversation, that Marian was supposed to walk Teresa to her apartment. She lived in the middle stairwell on the second floor. Elżbieta started the engine and drove away. The next day, which was already September 18th on Friday, Teresa didn't come to work. Her colleagues started to worry. Elżbieta started calling her, but without any result, she eventually notified the police. The police officers arrived, the door to the apartment was locked. The fire department was called, and indeed, the firefighters put up a ladder, and one of the firefighters entered the apartment. The police officers entered. Teresa was already dead by then. She was lying on the couch, but she was lying there as if she had just gone to sleep. She was also dressed in all the clothes she had worn the previous evening, so that white blouse and the colorful skirt. It looked as if she had died in her sleep. The doctor arrived. He started examining the body, but he didn't find any injuries. Also, at that time, I would say in those years it was much simpler, because usually when there are no injuries, the police officers also saw that the apartment didn't show any signs of being searched. It looks like Teresa was alone in the apartment. Well, the family started asking the prosecutor not to perform an autopsy, so that she wouldn't be cut open, as they said. The prosecutor verified everything he had. The officer's notes and apartment inspection. He came to the conclusion that there really was no need to perform an autopsy. True, Teresa was only 47 years old, but those were different times too. That basically an autopsy costs money, and they were saving on everything. Those were additional costs of the proceedings. So the prosecutor decided that she died of natural causes. Besides, the doctor himself wrote that the death probably occurred naturally. It was probably a heart attack. Therefore, the prosecutor decided that he would not perform an autopsy, that there is no need for it. In fact, the family was even glad that such a decision was made. A few days later, on September 22nd, Teresa's funeral took place. There were quite a lot of people, including friends, co-workers, and family. A lot of people came to the funeral and said goodbye to Teresa. Marian, who accompanied Teresa, was actually from the Podkarpacie region. He came to Krakow a few years earlier. In his family home back in Podkarpacie, his parents remembered him very fondly. They said what a good boy he was. He did well in school. He took part in various competitions. He won those competitions. In general, he was an altar boy for 15 years. When his father got sick, he took care of his younger siblings. So the family also had a very good opinion of him. By profession, he was, let's say, just a painter. He hired himself out to paint rooms, among other things. When the time came, he went into the army. Back then, there was still compulsory military service that lasted 2 years. He went into the army and he was deeply affected by his time there. It seems he didn't talk about it much, but it seems that in the army, he experienced what they call the wave. Basically, it means being harassed by older colleagues. He felt it deeply, mentally. When he got out of the army, he said he needed to let it all out, that he had to go out into the world. And that's when he chose Krakow. He came here and rented an apartment. And he also started going to different kinds of places. But Marian also had these sexual preferences. He especially liked women, and women much older at that. Even if they were several decades older, he felt good in their company. He could talk to them. And it seems that he was also able to meet their expectations. That's what Marian said later. He actually knew the Hermitage as well. He used to come here quite often. He knew that women he might like came here. That's how it was. And on that September 16th, he came to the place. He looked around and immediately his eyes fell on 3 ladies sitting at one of the tables. He especially liked one of them. He approached. He introduced himself. He definitely made an impression. Because, as I said, he was very handsome. Well, he was simply hoping, as he said, for some romantic moments. After that, he spent the whole evening courting Teresa. In the morning, they left. They drove in that friend's car, and he got out with Teresa at the housing estate on the hills in Nowa Huta. As he suspected, Teresa actually invited him to her apartment. They went upstairs. She lived on the 2nd floor. They talked about something. Teresa turned on the television. They started watching it. After a while, she also made some tea. They sat down on the sofa bed. And they talked. There was also a moment like that when she moved closer to him. She scooted over to him and she wanted to kiss him. I suppose Teresa didn't know that Marian, while he felt comfortable in a larger group, but when it came to a more personal one-on-one interaction, well, I would say he wasn't very confident anymore. So when she moved closer to him, she wanted to kiss him. He pulled away. He sat on that sofa for a moment, and then in turn, he moved closer to her. She pulled away, and she said, "You brat."
Thanks.
We know that from Marian's account. That day, since it was already early on September 17th, we know that Marian returned to the apartment that the owner was renting. He was even surprised that it was so early. He started packing, putting all his things into his bag, when the owner of the apartment asked him what happened, why he was packing. He said that his father had died and he had to quickly return to Podkarpacie. Marian returned to Podkarpacie, and a few days later he met with his friends, with friends he had known before. He showed them that he had some rings, a gold chain. He also told them that his wife had died 2 years earlier, that all these items belonged to his wife, and he was looking for a way to sell them because he needed money. Of course he was lying, because Marian never had a wife before. His colleagues showed him or gave him the address of a local jeweler. There in Przemysl, he went to that jeweler and sold him all those items. It seemed that basically the case was closed. Teresa was buried. Marian he returned to Podkarpacie. But exactly 10 days later, on September 27th, Marian comes to the police station in Jarosław. He tells the officer at the front desk that he's been feeling guilty for several days, that he's having nightmares, that he killed a woman he didn't know before, that he killed this woman in Krakow. He doesn't even remember exactly where this woman lived, but he's convinced that he must have killed her. First, the police officers in Jarosław checked if there had even been any murder in Krakow in the past few days, but they didn't find any such information. There was no information in the police bulletins about a murder in Krakow, but they notified their colleagues from Krakow anyway. Marian knew that it was Nowa Huta, so the police officers from Nowa Huta went to Jarosław to get Marian. They brought him to the estate on the hills and started looking for the apartment he had been in a few days earlier. Marian, though with difficulty, identified the correct apartment. He went inside with the police officers. First they checked if there had been any murder here. It turned out there was no murder, but in fact a few days earlier, 10 days earlier, a woman had died in this apartment, and Marian insisted that he had killed her. There was that moment when I interrupted that they were sitting together on the couch. Marian said that she actually called him a brat, and then, as he said, he went into some kind of frenzy, some kind of rage. He grabbed Teresa tightly by the throat and held her like that for about 20-30 seconds. He said he held on until he saw blood coming out of her mouth and his fingers became very numb. At that moment, he let go. He went to the bathroom and started covering his tracks. He took a towel from the bathroom, wiped the blood from her mouth, and started wiping off all the fingerprints. Everywhere he had been sitting. He put that towel into a plastic bag. He also put in 2 glasses that had tea in them. He also searched, basically, her body. He found a few rings, he found a wedding ring, he found a gold chain. He just tore it off her neck. He also took the watch, then he took the keys. He had already arranged her body on the couch, as if Teresa was really sleeping. He locked the apartment door and left. He went to the taxi stand. He had nothing to pay with, because he didn't even have any money, so he gave the taxi driver one of the rings. Then he packed his things and went to Przemysl. In Przemysl, still in the train car, he met another man, and with him he traded for a signet ring. He gave him Teresa's other ring and took the signet ring from him. He arrived in Przemysl and actually sold the rest of Teresa's jewelry. At the jeweler's, that's the version of events Marian presented, and he clearly stated that he strangled Teresa. Marian, of course, said that he felt a huge amount of guilt the whole time. That guilt kept him from sleeping. He knew he just couldn't handle it mentally. And that's why he decided to go to the police and tell them everything. The prosecutor had a problem with what to do in such a situation. The only solution was, of course, to exhume Teresa's body, and that's exactly what happened. On October 2nd, they exhumed Teresa. Teresa was taken out of the grave again. An autopsy was performed at the Department of Forensic Medicine, and the doctor who conducted the autopsy confirmed that Teresa had indeed been strangled, that someone had crushed her larynx very forcefully. Someone must have held her in such a deadly grip for at least several dozen seconds, and there was no doubt about that Teresa was strangled. Maybe that's why the sentence that was later handed down was rather light. In the first instance, Marian received only 10 years in prison, and the appellate court reduced his sentence to 6 years. So as you can see, that's very little for a murder. Certainly the court took into account that Marian confessed to the murder. Remorse, a guilty conscience that he confessed to everything. We probably wouldn't even have known that a murder had taken place, because Teresa was buried and it was determined that she had a heart attack. The case wouldn't have looked this way. I would say that despite the tragedy of the murder, it would be a bit grotesque if it weren't for the mistakes that were made. There should have been an autopsy. No one wondered where the apartment keys had gone either. No one wondered where Teresa's jewelry had gone either. Because after all, we know women are observant, and her friends must have seen her wearing rings, a wedding band, and a gold chain. No one searched for Mariana during the initial investigation phase either. Who he was and what happened to him and Teresa that evening. Well, of course, a lot of these things were never explained, so it ended the way it ended. It's probably also a warning for police officers handling cases like this, but those mistakes really did happen. Another thing, it rarely happens that the criminal was remorseful, he was going through it. He came and told the police everything. Well, if there were more criminals like that, the police would have less work to do. And that's it for today's episode. Of course, as always, subscribe to our channel, and of course, take care.